I invite you to stand as you're able for our call to worship. We gather together to worship God. We gather here in the name of the living Christ. People of God, sing for joy. People to give praise to God our Maker, and so let us join together and confess our faith.
he would be. It doesn't take very many. It can be just 2 or 3, and I feel that same sweet spirit that I felt those times before. Surely I can say I have been with the Lord. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel His mighty power and His grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
The Old Testament reading is from Genesis chapter 28, beginning with the 10th verse. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of the Lord were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And by you and your descendants shall all the families of the earth bless themselves. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done that of which I have spoken to you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob arose early in the morning, and he took the stone which he had put under his head, and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of the place Bethel. Please stand for the reading of the gospel. The gospel reading is Matthew chapter 13, beginning with the 24th verse. Another parable he put before them, saying, The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the householder came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then has it weeds? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, Gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. This is the word of God for the people of God.
The Lord was in this place, but I did not know it. The Genesis text begins by saying that Jacob set out from Beersheba heading toward Haran. I decided to Google map this the other day. Turns out that that's a tougher journey than you imagine. To get from Beersheba to Haran is 574 miles. If you look at the topography, Jacob begins at sea level. At one point, it dips to 900 feet below sea level. At another point, it's 4,000 feet above sea level. This is an arduous journey, and Google Maps tells me that that walk would take 189 hours. He's 65 miles into this thing, and by the way, that route passes by places that you've heard of today that are dangerous today, Damascus and Raqqa and Lebanon and Syria. Dangerous today was dangerous back then. Jacob is on this really hard, long journey. He's 65 miles into it, and he's in the middle of nowhere, really, a place called Bethel. And he's exhausted. There's no end in sight. And he's not just exhausted because it's a hard walk. He's exhausted because of his life. Like so much has happened, he's made so many mistakes, he's been harassed by so many people, he's from a super dysfunctional family, he's had so much stuff going on, he is haunted by it. That's part of why he's on this long journey trying to get away. And he is exhausted, and he tries to sleep. And it says that he had a stone for his pillow. Doesn't sound very promising. What kind of night do you have when you have a stone for a pillow? What kind of night do you have when you have a pillow for a pillow, right? Like what happens in the middle of the night? Some people are very lucky. Like Franklin Roosevelt. He's president during the Depression and then during World War II, but what he always said was, I did the best that I could all day long. At night, I lay down in the bed, I slept like a baby every night. He's a lucky dog. Not many people actually have that. A lot of folks that I talk to, stuff goes on in the night. When you wake up during the night, it's really dark and lonely. And whatever seems dark during the day seems worse at night, doesn't it? I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night. I'm a worrier in the dark. Sometimes I have dreams. You know, what do you make of your dreams? I have a recurrent dream. I don't mind confessing to you. I have this dream, I don't know, every couple of weeks. In the dream, it's Sunday morning, and I wake up, and it's 10 o'clock. And I go dashing to the church, but I can't find the church. It's the same as the dream that you have in college, that you're oversleeping the exam, right? And what does this have to do with God? I mean, you have anxieties. What are they? Is God there? When you're tossing during the night, is God there? There's an obscure verse in Psalm 56 that I love and that you can take some comfort in if you toss in the middle of the night. It says this, Psalm 56, O Lord, you have kept count of my tossings. Right? Like count sheep? No. Think that the Lord is counting the number of times that you've tossed. The Lord is there. Jacob has a dream at Bethel when the stone is his pillow and is of a ladder. And he sees the ladder and it extends up into heaven, and there are angels ascending and descending on this ladder. I always laugh when I think about this because I remember years ago. It was the Sunday after Christmas. I was off. I was out of town, went to a friend's church, and he was this pastor. He's a guy with a little bit of an outsized ego, very dramatic. And he does one of those children's sermons where they bring the children down front. So he's telling them about Jacob's ladder, and he does this gesture that was just a disaster. He said, there were angels going up and down and up, and he kept doing it, and up and down. Finally, a little boy turns to the congregation and says, he doesn't know up from down. Jacob doesn't know up from down. And we sing this, right? We sing the song, we are climbing Jacob's ladder as if we climb up to God. That's wrong. It's God who climbs down to us. Jesus climbed down from heaven and became an infant so that we might know him and love him. Jesus climbed down the ladder so that he could climb up onto a cross and give his life for us. The most wonderful words in this passage, we sang them, just thought about them. Jacob wakes up having seen this ladder, and what could be more hopeful than this? Jacob says, the Lord was in this place, and I did not know it. Like, how good is that, right? The Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. God's presence doesn't depend on you being pious and holy. God's presence doesn't depend on you asking for it. God's presence doesn't even require that you're aware that God is there. God just is there even if you do not know it. Sometimes we only realize it in retrospect. I wrote a book about this a few years back called Struck from Behind, where I tried to reflect on moments in my life that God was very present, but at the time I wasn't praying. I wasn't even a religious person. I didn't even know that God was blessing me, but God was. I think about things like, so many examples. When I was in high school, in my junior year, I decided to go out for football, and I showed up and met the coach, and I was 5'7", I weighed 128 pounds. He should have laughed his head off, but instead he embraced me and took me in and befriended me and was patient with me, and we're still friends to this day. He still calls me periodically. God blessed me with Bob Montgomery. God blessed me with amazing grandparents. When somebody dies, they say they've gone to a better place. Sometimes we can believe that because we know there is such a thing as a better place. My grandparents' home is like a better place. So much love. God blessed me with that. When I started Duke Divinity School, I was shocked that I was even there. And the very first day, I wasn't praying, I wasn't doing anything. I was just trying to get my stuff done. And I turned around a corner, and I literally, physically crashed into a guy who became my lifelong mentor. I wasn't asking for a lifelong mentor. I didn't know that I needed one. We ran into each other. I might not have met him otherwise. Surely the Lord was in that place, and I did not know it. We miss this a lot. We think we detect God's presence. You know, a healthy child is born, and we say, oh, God's handiwork. Or we see a beautiful sunset or a mountain vista, and we say, oh, God's great work. Oh, look. But be very clear, the Lord is present when a child is born that has huge challenges. The Lord is there when you just can't have a child. The Lord is there in the storm. The Lord is there in the place that nobody takes a photo of. The Lord is there among the people from whom everyone else averts their gaze. The Lord is in this place. We do not know it. Here's a radical claim for this sermon. The Lord is even in the church. Go figure. The Lord is even in the church, but we tend to think that, right? Like the Lord's in the church, but sometimes the Lord is in the church in ways that we don't anticipate and don't understand, or maybe we miss. Jesus wants us to get this. He tells this story about, see, last week we had the story where we realized that Jesus was a carpenter. He's no good at farming, right? Last week he talked about the parable of the sower. Not a smart farmer. He throws seed on the rocks and on the thorns and on the road. That's not the way to run a farm. Now he tells another one, is that there's a wheat field, but there are all these tares. There's all these weeds in the field. If you know anything about farming, you got to get those weeds out of there. If you have your flower garden, you got to get the weeds out of there. A story comes up, they're wheat and they're tares, and it's a story about the church. And we miss this so often, don't we? Like, there are wheat and tares in the church. And my assumption always is, I'm wheat, you guys may well be tares, right? We could seat you. You seated yourself this way today. Here's the wheat. You're on my side. You're wheat. And you guys over there, tares. I don't know, weeds. You got work to do. We do this in the United Methodist Church in our denomination right now. We have progressives and conservatives, and the progressives think we're wheat, but those conservatives are weeds. But the conservatives think, yeah, we're wheat, and those guys are weeds, and they just want to be rid of each other, right? This goes on. People, we're no good at figuring this out, right? A while back, I was talking to a guy, we were getting acquainted, and I said, where do you go to church? And he said, I don't go to church. I said, well, you ought to come to my church. He said, I know people in your church. I'm not coming. I said, why? He said, you got a bunch of hypocrites in your church. I said, really? Like, give me names. Like, we'll get them out of there. Like, we can't have that in church. There are hypocrites everywhere. It's just the most ridiculous thing. Is what we want. I was buying groceries just yesterday, and on my list was bread, and I couldn't help but notice it. When I picked up the bread, it said 100% whole wheat. Like, that's what we want. We want the church that's 100% wheat, forgetting that not one of us is 100% wheat. Like you say, I'm the wheat, those guys are the tares, but actually you're wheat and tares. Here's the thing. Jesus looks at the field and their wheat and their tares, and he says, instead of getting the weeds out, just let them grow together. You can say that's no way to run a farm. But there's something important in there. This drove me back this week to a novel that I read years ago by a guy named Stephen Bransford. It didn't sell a lot at the time. It's a novel about a Methodist circuit rider. You know, back in the 1800s, you had these Methodist preachers, and they rode around on horseback, and they went from community to community and preached and tried to plant churches. And so the circuit rider, he'd gone to this little community, and they'd had a lot of suffering. They had a couple people who died young, and they'd had a murder. So there's all this evil in this community, and so he's trying to minister to the people, and there's this young man who says, I'm not sure I can have much to do with God because there's so much evil. Like, how can there be a God if there's evil? Why doesn't God do something about it if God is a good God? His climactic question to the circuit rider was this: why doesn't God just finish off evil now? Good question. Why doesn't God just finish off evil now? And the preacher thought about it. He remembered Jesus' story about the wheat and the tares. And he jumped up and he grabbed the young man by the hand and said, come over here. They were under a tree, and they went out in this field where there's a lot of beautiful, tall, green grass that was growing. He said, look at that grass. That's good grass, isn't it? Yeah. He said, but notice there's some pennyroyal. That's a weed. Yeah. So the preacher reached out and he grabbed the stem of the pennyroyal and he yanked it out of the ground. Well, dirt goes flying, and so does a lot of the grass. And the preacher said to the young man, you see, under the ground where we can't see, their roots are all tangled up together. And if you pull out the weed, you tear up the grass. He said, each one of us underneath, we have all these roots, and they're all tangled up. We've got good roots, and we've got sinful roots. You got holy roots, and you have evil roots. And they're all tangled up together. And if God comes down and destroys evil, he'll destroy us. And he doesn't want to destroy us or anybody. He wants us to live. I'll close with a story that I may have told you before. This is my 15th year. It's just hard to remember, and there's only so much stuff. But some things bear repeating. So I love this story. I heard it in person from Tony Campolo. If you don't know who Tony Campolo is, he's kind of the Dick Vitale of Christianity. He preaches. He's just got way too much caffeine in his system, but he's amazing. He's wonderful. As I saw him one time, and he tells the story that he'd flown to Hawaii to give a talk. And with the time change and the jet lag and everything, he couldn't sleep. So it's 3 in the morning. I mean, what happens in the middle of the night? It's 3 in the morning, and the hotel bar is closed. So he sticks his head out of the hotel, and he notices there's a diner across the street that's open. So he goes into the diner. Nobody's there except just the cook and his wife are behind the bar. So he sits at the counter on the little stool, and he orders something. And then some women come in from work. They're like, clearly women of the night, and some sit on this side of him in the bar. Sit on this side of him in the bar. He's trying to be invisible, right? He's at this bar with these prostitutes, right? And then they start talking, and he can't help but overhear their conversation because they're just there. And in the course of it, one of them says, I just want you to know my 39th birthday is tomorrow. And the woman to the left of him said, well, who cares if it's your birthday? You think we're going to bake a cake or throw you a party or buy you a present or something? She said, well, no, I wouldn't expect you to do something like that for somebody like me, but I just thought I'd say it. I've never had a birthday party. I mean, and they just went and kept yakking on and on like this. And Tony waited until the women left. And he said to the cook, he said, do they come in here every night? And he said, yeah, every night about 3 o'clock. They come in here. He said, do you hear the woman talking about her birthday? Yeah. He said, her name's Agnes. He said, Agnes is really a kind person. Tony said, I've got an idea. Let's throw a birthday party for Agnes. I'll go to the Kmart and buy some streamers, and I'll get a cake. And the cook said, no, I do the cakes here. I'll do the cakes. And so they come back the next night, and Tony's decorating the place, and the guy's got the cake and some candles, and word's gotten out there's going to be a birthday party for this prostitute named Agnes, so the place is just full of women from all over Honolulu. And Tony's there with them. He's feeling awkward, of course. And then Agnes comes in with her friends, and Tony shouts, happy birthday! And they bring out the cake, and everyone sings happy birthday, and Agnes just loses it. She's just sobbing. So after a minute, Tony says, let's cut the cake. And Agnes said, do we have to? She said, I've never had a cake before. Could I take it home? Tony says, your cake. Take it home if you want to. So then there's kind of an awkward silence. Tony didn't know what to do. Being a preacher, he suddenly found himself saying, let us pray. And he immediately wondered, why did I say that? But then he was stuck, so he had to pray. So he started praying, and he just thanked God for Agnes, and she's such a beautiful child of God. And he prayed and acknowledged that she's probably been hurt by a great many people in her life. She's been mistreated by a great number of men in her life. And just prayed for healing and hope and love and life. So he finished the prayer and he said, Amen. And the cook at this point says, who are you? And Tony says, I'm just a guy. He said, what do you do? He said, I'm a preacher. He said, you're a preacher? He said, what kind of church are you a preacher of? And Tony said, it's quick thinking. He said, I'm the preacher of the kind of church that throws a birthday party for a prostitute at 3 a.m. And the cook said, no, you aren't. And Tony said, what do you mean? No, I'm not. And the cook said, that church doesn't exist. He said, but if it did, I'd join. Wheat and tares, all of us. What kind of church are we going to be? Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. And there's so much mercy and life and hope in that. Thanks be to God.
Hey, thank you for watching, and we hope you got something out of that. If you have any feedback for us, any response that was helpful to you, we would love to hear that. Please let us know. And everything that we put out is free, and we want it to be that way, but if you're able and feel led to support the mission of our church or the cost of providing this online content, here's how to do so.